the Lambeth Conference, big meeting of the Church of England leaders and Orthodox bishops at the Lambeth Conference, believing in the orthodoxy, the traditional views of the Church, that's what we mean by that, they, it's been reported, will abstain from receiving Holy Communion during the services at Canterbury Cathedral. Now, you speak of receiving Holy Communion, and what you mean is that you eat the bread and the wine during a communion service, and it has a very specific meaning. It means, if you're with someone doing it, that you're taking part with them in meeting the Lord.
Yes.
And in the Bible, in 1 Corinthians 11, it talks about going back to your friend or neighbour or brother who you've got something against and going sorting that out before you go and have communion with them. And so here we find they've got a few differences. They will abstain from receiving Holy Communion during the services at Canterbury Cathedral during the Lambeth Conference, because same-sex partners of bishops are invited to attend, and so they're not doing that. Now, they had a resolution about it. Resolution 110 of the Global South Fellowship of Anglican Churches affirmed the Christian Orthodox view of sexuality. And then earlier this week it was amended to include the plurality of views on the issues across the Anglican provinces, including those who bless same-sex marriage, which seems a bit of a watering down on it. So they are saying that, but the bishops themselves, it's a meeting of bishops, are not going to take communion because their same-sex partners will be there, presumably taking the communion. Do you think they're right to take this stand? I'm not going to take communion because you're there. Is that the right thing to do, do you think?
Yes, I think they are. I've been in that experience. In fact, it was one very unusual communion service where we were bidden before taking communion to go and put right anything that we might have against somebody who was attendant at the same service. And I did have something against somebody, and I tried to put it right.
Yeah.
Whether it put it right with the other person, they obviously didn't feel the same way as I did, but at least I'd done my part. And I suppose I would ask these bishops who won't be taking communion, have they actually been to these bishops with whom they have disagreement,
and spoken
have
to them
something
directly
against them, have they actually been to them personally and tried to put it right?
Yes. Well, the problem with putting it right would mean them dissolving their marriage.
Yes.
Well, I agree with you, though. I think that they should make a stand. I think they should go further than that. I think the Lambeth Conference should be abandoned. At least they shouldn't attend. The Anglican Global South Fellowship doing good work, and then there's GAFCON as well. They're sort of like rivals these days, aren't they? Who are another grouping of Orthodox bishops. They should walk away. I think it's gone too far.
Do you think then that they should go even a step further and have the Anglican Communion disbanded?
They've got their own Anglican communion.
Okay, so they shouldn't make a pretence of belonging to the same communion.
That's my opinion, yes. I think it's best to have it out in the open. You'll gradually be dragged down the path of least resistance and allow all sorts of inconsistencies and immorality unless you take a stand at this point.
But presumably the Anglican communion relies on the Archbishop of Canterbury keeping it together.
Traditionally it has. But it needn't be the Archbishop of Canterbury. I mean, it's not the centre of church growth at the moment. Why not all go and meet in Africa?
Which they have done.
Why the Lambeth Conference?
Well, I guess that is the main focus of the Anglican Communion as such.
Yeah, it has been traditionally, but that hasn't been for that long. Early 20th century, I think they started doing it, and I think it's time to stop. That's my opinion.
But then who stops it?
Well, they only stop it by not going.
No, they don't stop it because the Anglican Communion will carry on without them.
Fine, because there's enough who don't. You see, you've just heard of the Global South Fellowship Anglican churches. They're quite a big grouping, so they would be able to have their own meetings. They could carry on meeting, just not in the Lambeth
Yes, but
Conference.
nobody was stopping them from meeting.
No one's stopping them from meeting.
Want for the Anglican Communion to listen to them, take heed of what they are doing, and come back to its roots.
It's gone too far if bishops are in same-sex marriages.
Yes.
I just feel it's gone too far. And I think that's in the American Episcopal Church. That church should have been thrown out a long time ago. If that's not being done, I think they shouldn't be a part of it. They can come back once it's been sorted out, if it ever is. So I think that they're right not to attend a communion, but I just don't think they should be there at all.
Where do you think the basis of this is? I'll tell you where I think the basis of it is that the relationship between men and women has not been sorted out. The Anglican Church says that as long as you are not in practicing same-sex relations, then you can be part of the Anglican Church.
The Church of England says that, yes.
Yes.
But the American Episcopalian Church, the equivalent in North America, doesn't say that. They allow same-sex marriages, even amongst their bishops.
Yes.
So
I was aware of that.
The majority of the Anglican Communion says what you said, but this particular church does not, and that goes completely against what the other churches are teaching. How can they be part of the same communion?
So perhaps
it's not a small
the Church
difference.
of England ought to, particularly since it has the Archbishop of Canterbury who leads the Anglican Communion, ought to take things in both hands and say, I'm sorry, we are disbanding the Anglican Communion from now on. You are not to take on its headship.
I think what the Church of England should take a lead in and call for is for any church that does this, goes against biblical teaching, to be thrown out of the communion rather than disbanding it. It's because they're not doing that I'm saying don't attend.
Well, perhaps they're afraid that the Episcopalian Church will take over the Anglican Communion and run things their way.
Rapidly shrinking church. I don't think they're in any position to do that. There's an alternative Anglican church in America, ECUSO I think it's called, which is an evangelical version of the Anglican Church. Episcopalian just means with bishops. Episcopalian Church in America, I don't see them being in a strong position. Certainly their churches are shrinking very fast for reasons we discussed earlier. They're not Pentecostal, Beryl.
Okay.
Anyway, so we're broadly in agreement then that they shouldn't attend this communion service, but they're right to do that, but maybe they should go further is what I've been saying. Yeah. Okay, well...
Yes, I think I would completely agree with you, and I detect an arrogance amongst the LGBT community that they are right. Everybody else is wrong. They are right, so everybody else should do what they are doing. And perhaps, in a way, that's because of a bit of an insecurity amongst themselves. It is not purely the church. I've noticed very much during the current Commonwealth Games this pressure that says these other nations who don't have the same views towards same-sex as we do should actually learn and repent and become like us. And part of me screams, why should they? Why should they? They're just as intelligent. They're perhaps larger in population, perhaps a little bit more wise in terms of longevity of experience and so on. What right have these people in the West to say, you must do it our way, you must dance to our tune? I was looking to see what's the definition of the Lambeth Walk.
Right.
And doing the Lambeth Walk, it's a walking style of dance that was very popular around World War II time, and it was a particular dance movement. And perhaps the people at Lambeth are saying everybody should dance to our tune.
Yes.
And I sort of feel, no. I want to listen to other people's tunes, and the only real person whose tune I would dance to is actually God's.
Yes. Now, I think that's right. And if it were the Lambeth Walk, if all the bishops were to come on to the Lambeth Walk dance on camera at the Lambeth Conference, I would strongly support attending that. I think that would be hilarious. So it'd be worth doing.